Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek through Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Volume 12, Chapter 3, continuing on into the teleportation labyrinth. And yes, to save Roxy, because Andrew has not been having a good last couple weeks because of Roxy being in danger. But yes, slight spoilers for what I'm about to read. We do have a light at the end of the tunnel. We do have a goddess at the end of the tunnel. We are going to go rescue Roxy. And yeah, it put a big smile on my face reading these two chapters. But we'll see if I can do 3, 4, 5. As always, it just depends on how long the recording itself goes. I never know how long it's going to take just because I don't know how much I want to talk about certain things until I start to get into it. So that's always the oddity about this stuff. But as usual, take the pace as we go along. Really exciting set of chapters. I think we hit records for viewership for Mushoku Mondays last week. Really exciting stuff. Thank you guys so much for your support. Everybody that shares this stuff out, hitting the like button, supporting it other ways through monetarily, Patreon, tips link, memberships. I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate everybody's support. It means so much to me. Just got some new members. I don't know. Eventually we'll get to the point where we have more emotes. I don't know. I think the channel's broken. I feel like we're getting more members, but it doesn't feel like I'm able to break that mark just to get more emotes, but we'll see. Might just have to do like a gift sub thing and see if that fixes it. I don't know. But without further ado, let's get to saving Roxy the goddess. Chapter 3, Entering the Labyrinth. Arriving at the teleportation labyrinth, it looked like a cave. Webs covered the walls thanks to the spiders in the area. While most would see a photograph of it and not really have their interest piqued, in person, something gave Rudius a sense that there was a labyrinth within it, an unsettling air that provoked curiosity. He wondered if other labyrinths had the same vibe. That's sort of an interesting thing. Is it because he has that in his mind that there is a labyrinth here, you have that feeling, or is it merely the fact that there is, yes, this oddity about this cave? It has a mana within it, something that draws things in. He mentioned that. Why do the monsters keep coming in there and dying? Because they're drawn to the core. They want to go in there and consume it. It would be natural to think that humans themselves would have the same feeling. Something is in here. Okay, Rudius, we're going to do this just like we discussed. Got it? Gotcha. Paul clapped him on the shoulders and nodded. Lilia, Shira, and Vera bid them good wishes before heading back to the Rapon. Taking up formation, they stepped inside. Rudius wasn't excited. Despite his first time entering a labyrinth, he just had the weight of knowing they couldn't afford to fail. That's good. I mean, I would assume that if there was different circumstances, he'd be pretty excited. But this isn't a good trip. They're not going in here for fun. And you would assume that he would be excited about going in here. Like, this is my chance to go into... And it sucks because every time he has these first with something to do with ruins or labyrinths, there's always something that's pushing him to have to do it. Again, technically, he never wanted to go into labyrinths. When he was back in the Demon Continent, he didn't want to do any of that stuff. He wanted to stick to the safe route. Doing anything else, he could wind up dead. He's being forced to have to go in here. This isn't just a fun trip, which sucks because his previous life self would love this. Yeah, it's like a roguelike RPG. I get to do dungeon diving. What kind of good loot can I find? This isn't fun. Inside was dark, but it had a dim glow to it. He chose to use a lamplight spirit scroll that Nanahoshi gave him. A bright ball of light leapt forth and circled the top of his head. Geese used one as well because he'd be scouting. While they lasted longer with a larger mana pool, they apparently didn't cost much mana. Both Geese and Paul were delighted when he showed them the scrolls, realizing they didn't have to carry torches around. Taking such little mana and being much brighter than torches, if these scrolls got popular, torches might disappear from the markets completely. Now here's an interesting thing, because I'm like, yes, I made these big, massive predictions around these stupid scrolls. I was like, they gotta be special somehow. Because again, my mindset was that Rudius said that he knows a lamplight. Like, this is a thing, and it's not that special. He was a little bit let down. But maybe it was the fact that it was on a scroll, I guess, is the reason why it's so exciting. Because yes, he's kind of mentioning here, if these got out and was mass-produced, they would fill the world, and torches would go out of business. Like, they would just get rid of torches, because, oh, you don't want a torch, use this thing. It's so much better. So yeah, maybe I drew too much conclusions there. Paul, your kid brings some handy stuff along, eh? Well, I'm proud to call him my son for a reason. But you're sure ain't a parent for him to be proud of. Ah, leave it. I'm already feeling down enough about it. They pressed on through the first floor. It looked like an ant's nest with silken webs along the walls and ceilings. Further within was a magic circle emanating a pale light. You said to be careful because some of the magic circles don't light up, correct? That's right, Rudy. Make sure to follow Geese's footprints precisely. Geese was 10 steps ahead, wearing a special pair of boots. There was cross-shaped steel plates mounted on the soles, leaving a shape where he walked. It wasn't magic, just a product of adventure wisdom, protecting him from slipping while at the same time marking a path. This makes perfect sense. If you're having to step exactly where he's stepping, you need some sort of indication that's not going to be, you know, hard to recognize. Like, you could end up seeing somebody else's footprint that led them somewhere else. So looking for these little X's makes perfect sense. It's really cool. Teleportation circles on the first floor were easy to spot. While many small arachnids were skittering across the ground, they avoided certain spaces. These areas were traps. Avoiding stepping on these spires probably meant that you were going to end up teleported somewhere else. So yeah, it's like you see this ground and there's just tons of arachnids, but there's these little bare spots because they don't step on them. As Geese spotted death road tarantulas, Paul quickly dispatched them. He carried 2 swords. One was the same blade that he wielded back home, his partner. It didn't appear very powerful, but he was always able to slice his opponent in 2 with 1 hit. It was probably due to his skill. His left hand held a sword that was in a shape that Rudius had never seen before. Its length was between a short and a long sword. The handguard wrapped around the wielder's entire hand, with a slight curve, double-sided blade. Also a hole in the middle, likely to prevent it from sticking to something. It's kind of a very interesting blade. I think most all the swords they've kind of mentioned, I kind of know what it possibly is, but that's an odd one. And it'll be interesting if eventually it kind of explains why that particular sword. Paul generally fought with his right hand, so Rudius wondered what was the purpose of his left sword. Maybe he was a nerd in his final form. Yes, he's like, going dual wielding. Yeah. Rudius quickly realized how Paul looked at him every time he killed something. It was like he was wanting to show off how cool he was. And Rudius thought this was really annoying. He eventually was thinking in his mind, okay, I get it, Dad. You're cool, but please don't let your guard down. But somebody else spoke up. Paul, keep your head forward. Come on, it's fine. We've done this first floor a dozen times before. I'm not going to screw up that easy. Letting your guard down like that is exactly what will cost you your life. Yeah, I know already. Besides, you've been going too far ahead this whole time. I'm the one in the front, am I not? It's the first floor. Not like it'll make a big difference. Blech. There they go again. Myself aside, this is Rudius' first time in the labyrinth. As an adult, you should be setting a good example. That's why I'm looking for a good opportunity to strike up a conversation with him, to help loosen up his nerves. What nonsense. You seem as giddy as you were when Zenith first joined the party. Again, he's showing off. Not much I could say when you put it like that. What's up with you anyways? You turned into a real nag. Why, of course I have. You're basically like a son to me, so I'll scold you as needed. Here it is. It finally comes up. I almost forgot this has to be brought up eventually. What are you talking about? Calling me a son? Did you spend too much time with Rudius that you've developed a soft spot for me? Come on, enough of that. You calling yourself my mom gives me the creeps. Oh my. Has Rudius not told you? Told me what? Sylphie is my granddaughter. Since Rudius married her, that also makes you my grandchild. In that case, as parents of my grandchild, you and Zenith are basically like children to me. Paul froze, slowly turned, and marched to Rudius. The formation was broken in an instant. Everybody stopped. I like that it kind of notes that. Like, the moment that formations broke, stop. You basically have broken your formation. You cannot continue because you no longer have your sort of fort built. Hey, Rudius, what are you talking about? Why is Ellen Lace making these insane claims about Sylphie being her grandchild? Turns out, Laws was Ellen Lace's son. Laws was? He never said a word about any of that to me. Well, there was a lot that happened in their past. So it seems like he wanted to keep Miss Ellen Lace's identity under wraps. Ah, I see. I can kind of understand that. I don't know if that was a jab or he's like, yeah, all right, everything makes sense now. More importantly, we should keep going and take care not to let your guard down. Paul agreed and returned to his position. Seriously, so Ellen Lace is tied to our family now. I can't believe this. It just hit him so hard. Like, god damn it. That means you can't try to make her your third wife, too. As they came to a room teeming with death row tarantulas, this was Rudius' job as a mage to handle it. But Talhan spoke up, giving him a lot of advice before he proceeded. He warned him not to use fire magic because it filled the room with a poisonous gas. Rudius was like, oh, wait, poison? Can you fix it with detoxification? And he said no. Rudius assumed that he was referring to carbon monoxide poisoning. He just assumed that some sort of poison you're creating, not that it's just an effect of the fire itself and that it can't be cured. It's a different type of poison. It makes sense that the dwarves understand what carbon monoxide poisoning is, they just don't know exactly what it actually is. Just that this causes this, not understanding exactly how it works, or having a name for it, I guess. He also wanted Rudius to avoid hitting the ceiling as to not destroy the cave. Since water could also cause damage, ice was the preferred magic to use. Which is an important note now because later on it kind of discusses the idea that Talhand wasn't like the best option for a mage in their situation, because his preferred magic school is Earth. Rias could use Earth magic, but it may trigger collapse. This is because he could possibly utilize the earth within the cave itself rather than conjuring his own. In the end, he used what was recommended to him, conjuring advanced tier water magic, Blizzard Storm.
Oh, you really are Roxy's apprentice. You even use the same magic.
Apparently, Roxy used the same spell. That made Rias kind of happy to hear. Just like my master, I'm doing just like my master would.
And no incantations either. I can see why she's so proud of you.
His words made Rias' ego swell with pride as he mopped up the rest of the room. Their focus was on utilizing the teleportation circles and cross-reference what was written in the book. While they had already mapped out the teleportation circles on the first floor, it helped to verify the accuracy of the book. Again, they're making sure this book is spot on. They compared shape, color, and characteristics until they were satisfied to continue further. So if everything maps up here, they can trust it going forward. After 5 hours passed, they headed towards the last area on the first floor, which housed 2 circles lined up together. They were larger and glowed more intense than the ones before. The darker blue one led to the next floor, but it had a twin sitting right next to it. To the uninitiated, they both looked like the real deal. Yet a rock with a circle inscribed on it was placed immediately before one of them. Geese left this behind to signal which one was the correct one. Again, they've already been to this point, so they know exactly which one's going to take them to the next floor. You would think by now people would just be writing it on the wall like, this is the one, but then do you trust that? Some random person wrote on the wall. Though the labyrinth itself might remove things like that. Again, it's a breathing thing. It's a living, breathing thing, so it could just be like, it just kind of restores itself. Confirming it matched the book, they hopped on it. Arriving on the second floor, the skittering spiders were no longer around, and tarantula nests were reduced. Instead, they had iron crawlers slithering around, 1 meter tall and 2 meters long. They were fast though, despite their appearance. Additionally, they worked with the spiders as shields while they shot webs. Again, they technically hit on this idea of monsters working together. Technically, stronger ones commanding lower ones. It was like the whole case with the succubus. While caught in the web, the heavy 1-ton crawler would trample you. I wonder if they're actually weigh a ton. I think it's just kind of a joke name. I don't think they weigh a whole ton. Could. Since Paul couldn't defeat the iron crawlers with one strike, Rias handled tarantulas with the Blizzard Storm while using stone cannon on the iron crawlers. All while Paul and Elise kept them occupied. Normally, now this is the interesting thing, normally iron crawlers would repel a stone cannon, but Rias didn't have this problem. Again, the way he's using the stone cannon, he's making it faster and building it up and putting mana into it and shooting it like a bullet. He's mastered the art of the stone cannon. This tactic left Talhand bored, being on standby near Rudius. They were working prudently as possible. A good thing is they could reserve Talhand for later. Again, Talhand probably doesn't have this massive mana pool, so it's best that he keeps it. Utilizing the Demon Eye, Rudius was able to avoid the webs from the tarantulas. Even if one hit him, fire magic would get rid of it. Still, Paul and Elise couldn't dodge every single one of them. While Rudius could burn them away, Geese brought a liquid that was dissolving it. Still, Elise hated this stuff. It irritated her skin. Rudius kind of figured it was like a detergent. He could try it on his dishes back at home. At some point, Geese called out for them to take a break. Talhand and Elise immediately took watch, while Paul cleaned his gear. Seeing how quickly and practical he was about it, reminded Rudius that he was a pro in his field. What is it? You better hurry up too, Rudy. Oh, yes. Rudius turning his attention to his own gear, he realized he didn't really have much to inspect. Again, he was technically a ranged caster. But he realized Paul at this point got awfully quiet. On the first floor, he came to him during breaks and talked to him casually. It was to be expected, this was the second floor, but Paul turned serious. This is one of those things that you kind of notice reading it second time. We find out later on that they got stuck here. Like ever since they lost Roxy, they have been having problems getting past here. Why? Because Paul himself can't take out these iron crawlers in one hit. It's a lot of effort. They need a caster. And when they went down to the third floor, they were doing just fine getting to the third floor. But the moment they lost Roxy, they were having a tough time on the third floor. They couldn't get through it anymore. They've been stuck on this floor for a while now. So it makes sense that Paul right here, back here on the first floor, he's one-shot and everything. He don't care. Here, it's tougher. And I think it's got that sense in him. It's time to not screw around anymore. Now, based on your own ability, you could end up dead. As Paul got frustrated about the gunk on his gear, Rhea suggested using the liquid Geese gave them. Sure enough, it was some sort of detergent. The gunk came right off. Maybe Sylphie would like some back at home. As Paul got re-equipped, he relieved Elise on watch. Rias was considering doing the same, but Geese stopped him.
Boss, don't worry about Lookout.
Are you sure?
It's fine. That old man hasn't done any work anyways. Besides, there's something coming up here I'd like to get your opinion on.
Is it really okay for me to stand in for my father on that?
Of course. You're much smarter than him anyhow.
This interested Geese plucked out the book and 2 maps from his bag. One map was beautifully drawn, and the other was unfinished.
We'll be on the 3rd floor soon. This, right here. This is where Roxy got separated from us.
If we're lucky, she should be around that area.
If the book is anything to go off.
If we're lucky, she should be around this area still.
If the book's anything to go by.
Alright, according to the book, Trap sent you into different areas on the same floor. Even though they were called random warp, it wouldn't suddenly send you to the boss on the final floor. Roxy was warped on the 3rd floor. They had no idea if the circle that she stepped on was a random or a fixed destination. But if she was alive, there was a good chance that she was on the 3rd floor. If luck favored her, she might have made it to the 2nd or the 1st floor. But she traversed those floors numerous times. Considering her strength, if she made it to the 2nd floor, she would have left already. At the same time, it was difficult to imagine that she would go further onto the 4th floor. Well, there is a chance that she could. If she didn't know what the circle was going to take her, it could have took her to the 4th floor. She could be there.
There's no magic that can help find her, is there?
No, there's not. He wondered if he could utilize his spells to find her, but nothing came to mind.
Boss, just use your intuition on this. Where do you think Roxy would be?
My intuition, huh?
We can't afford to cover this entire labyrinth with a fine-tooth comb. So if we're going to look for her, we're going to need intuition.
All right, then how about this area? For the sake of it, he randomly selected an empty area on the unfinished map.
East of where she teleported, huh? Okay, then we'll start there.
Reese did feel like heading dead east was the most efficient way to go. After all, there wasn't anybody in the group that had analytical abilities to pinpoint her location. They would just have to search where they haven't investigated regardless. Now there's 2 things here. One is, did he choose east because that's what happened in the displacement incident for him? He technically went east? Well, technically he could have gone west, if the world's like that, but still. The other aspect is, technically, the uninvestigated areas shouldn't be areas that he's seeing. Again, they couldn't get past the 2nd floor ever since they lost Roxy. So it's not as if those areas that are unmapped is areas that they haven't checked for Roxy. It's just they haven't checked those areas when they had Roxy. So I'm not sure why he had that mindset there. According to Geese, the lack of Roxy in their party meant that they couldn't break through the 2nd floor. The monsters of this labyrinth were resistant to Talhan's preferred school of magic. With Paul getting wrapped up in webs, he couldn't cover the front. Vieira wasn't as reliable and couldn't cover people as well as Elise. To get through here, they needed someone with ice or fire magic. It was a wonder how they made it back without Roxy. I thought we could make do somehow, but there aren't many magicians in this area, and not one of them had the grit to challenge the teleportation labyrinth. Technically makes sense. Teleportation traps are like a death sentence. Now, granted, it's a death sentence for a lot of people, especially if they were how they explain it in the book itself, that some of them would take you somewhere where monsters were waiting. But for a mage, it's a little more difficult because your defenses are really low, or you just run out of mana trying to protect yourself and fight off a bunch of monsters by yourself. Geese was trying to find a solution on his own. Rita's seen him trying to recruit somebody. It seems we put you through a lot of trouble, Mr. Geese.
Don't worry about it. Also, I told you to call me newbie, didn't I?
You give me the creeps talking all polite like that. Got it, newbie. I'll introduce you to a nice girl monkey after this is all over with so you can have her pluck fleas off your back. He's talking about Goliath. He's totally talking about Goliath.
Oh, not bad.
Since I can't even go to the adult districts here.
Hey, wait, who you calling monkey?
Why can't you go to the adult districts here? I'm guessing because he's done some swindling or something like that. Yeah. Reese had a lot that he wanted to discuss with Geese, but he left it at that for now. There was so many uncharted areas in the 2nd floor map. He wondered if Roxy or Zenith was in one of those areas. Not checking them made Rudius feel uneasy, but they had to get to the 3rd floor. The best place to search wasn't the closest, but rather the place Roxy likely was. I can feel that. This idea that there's a possibility Roxy made it to the 2nd floor, maybe she got lost in one of those areas they haven't charted. But again, why specifically the uncharted areas? She could be anywhere in there that's been charted already that they have not gone through. It makes sense that this is the most logical option is to get to the 3rd floor. Elise inserted herself in the conversation, asking their location. They would be moving beyond the 2nd floor soon. While she complained about the monsters changing in formations partway through, she ran her hand over her hair. Her usual proud curls were looking unkempt. By the way, Geese, why do you call Rudius boss? He chuckled. We got to know each other in a Dolia gel. A Dolia gel? You mean the ones that Ghislaine talked about before? How in the world did that happen?
I'll tell you more about it when we get home.
Geese shot a grin. It brought back memories for Rudius. Experiencing true freedom being naked. Something he couldn't do anymore, except for when he was in bed. He clearly wasn't too nervous to have those thoughts. 10 hours after they first entered, they arrived on the 3rd floor. They were moving quite swiftly. I thought it would take us several days to delve this far.
It would be if we didn't have a map.
Rudius felt something unsettling in the air, radiating from deep within the cave. The real thing started here. First, they had to find Roxy. Just then,
Just then, her familiar scent came wafting in the air. No, it wasn't his imagination. This really was her smell. Her presence that he felt. He wouldn't mistake this. He could feel his heart racing. She was here. He was certain. He could smell the aroma of the goddess Roxy. Technically, an aroma that has been seared into his brain from smelling her pantsuit over and over and over and over until Lilia washed them. I was so happy when I read this. Technically, I seen the next chapter name and it was like, oh, her perspective. And then it like Roxy right underneath it. I was like, Roxy chapter is coming up. Roxy chapter is coming up. I was super happy to see that, obviously, because, gosh, I miss Roxy so freaking much, and I don't want her in danger. But it technically does play into a certain story, fantasy that Roxy has. Something that was hinted way, way back on the Demon Continent when Roxy was walking around with Ellen Elise and Talhan. She had this dream of being trapped in a labyrinth and some brave boy comes in and saves her. It's Rudius. Apparently that was that obvious. Apparently that was, I mean, technically back then when I watched in the anime format, it was like, oh, so eventually she's gonna get trapped in a labyrinth and Rudius is gonna come save her. And then it'll have that romantic moment between the two of them. But yeah, like I mentioned before, I technically don't ship Rudius and Roxy anymore. I really don't feel like, just like I had my problems with Sylphie. I have my own reasons for believing that I don't think that Roxy is really fit for Rudius. He honestly doesn't see that either. He sees her as this goddess. It's literally his god. It's not a joke in his mind. It is literally his deity. So again, I'm really, really looking forward to these coming chapters, and I don't think they're gonna have a moment to talk. I hope they do, maybe between breaks. I'm hoping for a moment that they can talk because I'm really wondering if we're gonna have this moment where Rudius does end up going, she's a normal girl. Finally realizes she's a normal girl. Finally takes her off that pedestal. But I don't think anything that happens beyond this point is going to change much. Again, she saved his life. And no matter what happens going forward, it's not gonna change the fact that that moment was important to him. His childhood in this world, and that moment he met her and she saved him from this life of being a NEET in his previous life and even in this life, that's massive for him. But we shall see. We shall see. But before that, it's time for the Roxy chapter. Yes. Roxy's in the chat. Andrew finally gets a Roxy chapter. Now, granted, we did have a sort of one when we had the whole situation with Rajur taking Norn and Aisha up north. But it wasn't really a Roxy chapter. It was kind of like a Norn / little bit of Roxy type of chapter. So, yeah, it's been a long time since we had a full-on Roxy perspective. I think, again, the official one, I think, was way back when she met Kishirika. But either way, this was the thing that made it to where I stopped panicking. Because I read chapter 3, and then I get to this point, and I just see Roxy at the top. I'm like, now, it doesn't mean that Roxy's safe, but it's still, I had like a sigh of relief, like, okay, at least I know right here with chapter 4, she's alive. So, we're good. But yes, chapter 4, her emotional perspective. This chapter was honestly very, very difficult for me to read. Just based on my love of Roxy, I did not like this chapter. I liked getting a perspective of Roxy, liked hearing her inner thoughts, but at the same time, oof, it hurt. It hurt so much. Roxy was inside a narrow, dark space, barely as tall as her, and wide enough for only 2 people to lie down. She arrived here after teleporting several times. Now here's the interesting part, because my assumption when I first started reading this was that she stepped on a teleportation trap, teleported somewhere, and she's been stuck there. Like, she was stuck inside of a coffin, basically. But I think what we sort of get after a while is you sort of realize this aspect of, no, she's been trying to get out of there. And it, again, another one of those aspects that really hurts. As long as she was within this cramped area, no monsters could teleport in. As she sat there at the edge of the space against the wall, she gazed at the teleportation circle before her. If she were to set 1 foot on it, she would be sent somewhere. Most likely a monster's den, filled with dozens of monsters, and likely her death. A month ago,
she stumbled. She was evading an attack directed at her. She stepped back, tripped over a rock, lost her balance, and her foot landed right on a magic circle. Even though she had gone over where all the traps were before battle, she so easily stepped on one. Here is the beginning of what I feel like this entire chapter, and especially the next chapter, is an absolute self-beatdown. Which again sort of plays into what I feel is Roxy's character so far. Just based on, yeah, seemingly just like the first few volumes, and then finally we get to see her again. She's so down on herself. And yes, partly to do with the fact of what happened with Rudius. Meeting Rudius really did ruin her. Just gave her so much self-doubt of her own capabilities. And yes, technically right after that, running into PAX and realizing, no, she's not skilled at teaching all this stuff. When she stepped on this, she was teleported to a place full of monsters. 20, no, 30 of them. She was a magician, a good one, able to shorten incantations, and facing a vast number of enemies wasn't new to her. Surrounded, she didn't panic and eradicated her enemies, but they kept coming. The beast knew exactly where the teleporters went. This was sort of hinted at with the Teleportation Labyrinth book. This idea that these monsters are really, really smart. Like, these aren't dumb monsters. And so they actually know if this person goes over here and steps right here, they'll be over there. So they'll be waiting for them. And the book was mainly pointing out this idea that some teleporters were a fixed destination. And that was the one that the monsters liked to hang out at because they knew that whoever stepped there would come here. The teleportations that are random, you can't really prepare for that. But the fixed destination ones, those were deadly. Granted, the random ones are too, because if you don't know where it's going, you've lost your group, which is exactly what happened to Roxy. Roxy was prepared to die. She could defeat all the monsters, but her mana wasn't endless. Even at 20%, the monsters didn't cease. She was cornered, and help wasn't coming. Perhaps Paul and his party had abandoned her. If she was in their shoes, she wouldn't save a klutz like her. No matter your mana, if you were foolish enough to step on a trap, you were just dead weight. Again, self-deprecating like crazy. But no, she corrected herself. They weren't the type to do that. Except for Geese in one conversation. Again, he was looking for somebody to fill the party to go find her. Though she figured they also could have been caught up in a teleportation too, or lacking combat strength due to her absence and had a temporary withdrawal. Regardless, help wasn't coming. As she felt her mana dwindling and the threat of tears welling up, she spotted a light. 6 magic circles in a spacious room. Monsters appearing from all but one of them. She figured no monsters were on the other side of that single one. So because of this, she figured that one that they weren't coming out of, there wasn't any monsters on the other side. She finished off the monsters and hopped on, ending up to where she was at now. She survived. Her luck had held. This is where I was like, okay, that's where it ends. Like, I assumed, like, right here, that this was sort of the end of it. Now she's just been sitting there for an entire month. No. It gets worse. She fed off her food supply and made water on her own, waiting out the day for her mana to replenish. The next day, she stepped on a magic circle. There it goes. Here's the cycle starting. Appearing somewhere else, she realized it was a random warp. So the one that was within that one room with a whole bunch of them, that was a fixed destination. But then the one in the room itself was random, which I thought was kind of interesting. I would assume that would be like a two-way street. But I guess that makes sense because that would be way too easy to go back and forth. It can't be simple. I guess by that point, the one that she stepped on, she could just go back. It wouldn't be that simple. With no one since in the area, she mapped the area and forged onward to escape. She could wait for help, but there was a possibility that Paul and the others were dead. Random teleportation traps were just that deadly. She wove the tunnels, marking each teleportation circle as she stepped on them. The teleportation labyrinth was designed to make it impossible to get anywhere without doing do. Here we go again. Here we go again. It is time for Andrew's regular what the heck 7 C's is wrong with your editing group. Where is it at? Yep, doing do. Anywhere without doing do. How do you miss that? Google Docs can tell you that. Just put it in Google Docs and look. Anyways, she stepped carefully for traps, continuing forward, not knowing if she was making progress. It was impossible to get your bearings in this labyrinth. She was anxious, but she had to press on. Her food wouldn't last forever, nor her mind. That's the important thing. And I think that's like even more so with the aspect of a teleportation labyrinth. Again, she's going teleport, go over market, teleport, go over market. You can't get your bearings. Like, you don't even know where you're at. You don't even know if you're going in circles. Yes, you're marking stuff, but there's a chance that somebody's moving it or a monster's moving it, or you may never end up into an area where you once were if it's that big. I'd assume these floors are huge. Like, because they haven't marked off so many locations, they probably spend a lot of time trying to figure out where each location is. These places are probably really big. And so even if your food runs out, the bigger issue is, because she can hydrate herself at least, so she can even last even longer than that. Like, I think hydration is more important than substance. Whereas hydration, you kind of just need it. Otherwise, you're just going to croak. But that disorientation, that fear of death constantly, I guess, is the other aspect to it, is you're constantly wondering when the monsters are going to get you. And it gets into that with this. Like, this gets so heavy on that idea of they keep coming. They're getting smarter. They're waiting for me. Yeah, her food wouldn't last forever, but she was feeding on monster meat. Yet after countless teleportations, she was once again sent to a den of monsters. She fought and found herself yet another circle from which no beasts appeared. That was how she made it back to that little space. It's like a save room. You know how you have like these RPGs where you're like going to this long dungeon and then suddenly you teleport to this one little space and there's like a little resting spot? Save. How many times did she repeat this cycle? 5? 10? The circle in this room was random, but she always ended up back here. I was actually wondering at this point if there was a possibility that the place that Roxy's in is actually sort of a isolated area. So here's the normal labyrinth area for this floor. You'll come in right here, you path over to here, and here's the one to the next floor. But what if there's certain traps here that takes you to this isolated area on that floor that's not connected physically with a tunnel? That would explain why she never could get out of there. What if it's a one-way street? Or possibly the circles where the monsters aren't coming out of is the only way to get back. She was exhausted, her heart and mind at its limits. According to her internal clock, about a month had passed. A month of no progress. Another mental hit right there. I spent all this time and I keep ending up here. What's the point? She had also taken damage and was growing faint from blood loss. The monsters were even blocking the circle so she couldn't escape. Here's where you get like, damn, that's terrifying. These aren't dumb monsters. They were quite intelligent, taking everything she had to break through. Her joints hurt. She was out of food. The monster meat was awful. Being so toxic, you had to use detoxification just to eat it. She was cornered and had no idea what would happen next. The next group of enemies may be more coordinated. Tear her limb from limb. If she made it through, she'd be back here again. Those thoughts alone kept her from stepping on that circle once again. And here's that aspect of the paranoia. The beasts likely noticed her presence, knew she was in that cramped place. She was sure they were waiting for her to make a fatal mistake in her exhaustion. And I think the only reason that whenever she steps on that thing, she's not immediately running into a whole bunch of monsters is because it's a random. They know where she has to go to get out, but they don't know where she pops up. She was sure they were waiting for her to make a fatal mistake in her exhaustion. For the first time, she was conscious of death. Monsters would consume her, leaving no proof of her existence behind. She was terrified, grinding her teeth together. Driven by the impulse to scream, she gripped her staff tight. Again, I hate this chapter so much. Volume 12 sucks. Oh, my poor Roxy. She had seen death countless times before. As an adventurer, she's seen monsters shred and crush others. She knew that one day it would be her turn. Yet, she also believed she'd make it through. Yet now she was terrified of death. She still hadn't accomplished anything. Again, here comes more self-deprecation. It's a self-deprecation Roxy chapter right here. She hadn't accomplished anything. Still, so much she wanted to do. She had a dream to become a teacher. She loved teaching people. Despite having no talent of it, she still enjoyed it. So much that after saving Zenith, she wanted to go take the teacher's exam. She wanted to be a professor at the University of Magic. It's like, oh, cool. I like that. I thought, I don't know, I guess I assumed that Roxy before was just going around just trying to find a way of making money. And so she took the tutor job and that worked out well. So she decided to go teach PAX 2. utilizing the fact that she is technically as skilled as she is. They brought her right in. They love those mages. So my assumption was that it was just something that she was doing as a mage. Like, this is a way of making money. You know, she did all the dungeon diving, got it out of her system. Didn't know that she actually liked the idea of being a teacher. Maybe something that was kind of instilled upon her because she enjoyed her time teaching Rudius. So I don't think they ever mentioned the idea that she was doing a lot of that work before. As we'll find out later, she sort of was traveling around looking for work. Then she went out to the boonies and ended up seeing that tutor job for Rudius, took that job on. This is a cool insight to her, to see that this is something that she sort of dreams about doing. But still, it kind of sucks in the idea, and we sort of got a hint of that, I think, a while back, in this idea that she doesn't feel adequate because she taught Rudius, thought that she had some talent to it. She knew that he was a genius, and that he was picking up really quickly, and that he was far superior to her. But it was when she went to go teach Pax. No, never mind. I do suck at this. Because Pax is a dirtbag. Don't let these two guide you on how good you're at this. Again, genius isekai because he's got all this previous knowledge, and then just an idiot. Pax is an idiot. Don't gauge your ability to teach based on them. Her teacher, which she had a falling out with, was there. They may bicker again, but she had the feeling that they would get along better now. He loved to be the center of attention. She wouldn't be surprised if he was promoted to vice principal while she was gone. Genius? I don't remember. I want to say that when Rudius first met Genius and sat down and talked to him, I think he mentioned something about Roxy. But I don't think he was like, oh, that was my pupil. How's she doing? Which would make sense because he probably acknowledged her skill, but didn't want to talk about her. Roxy wanted a taste of normal happiness. She wanted a normal life. Become a professor, get married, fall in love, have passionate nights together. She had a stumpy little body of a child as a demon, but she had to have a chance. Chat, come on, tell him. There's so many people like, yes, Roxy, you're good, girl. Isn't it always funny whenever you have those characters in anime or something like that, where it's like, there's the one character that feels like they're inadequate, like their body isn't good enough, they're not developed as much as other characters, and so they figure that they'll never have happiness, and it's always like, all the anime fans are like, girl, you're good. But I guess technically there's plenty in the world that would probably be after Roxy. She just never probably noticed it. She was never looking for it. Pax was sure after you, Roxy, so that at least gives you a sign that somebody knows good taste, even though he's a dirtbag. Don't go after Pax, though. I'm not saying that. And if she ends up going after Pax later on, I don't want to know. I don't know, maybe Pax will have, who knows? Again, Refugin, this writer, knows how to suddenly just pull the rug out from under me. So, I don't know, maybe Pax has a redemption arc. I'll take it. I just don't think he's good enough for Roxy. She let out a self-deprecating chuckle. Indulging in such fantasies under this condition, she was going to die, and none of her dreams would come true. She never heard of a person being saved from this predicament before. Once again, she decided to step on the circle. She wanted to live. Again, teleported somewhere unfamiliar. Once again, finding herself at the den of monsters. They blocked her escape with the bodies of dead brethren. What? It's like they stacked up a bunch of bodies. Like, these dudes are crazy. These monsters are crazy smart. She had no choice but to clear the way to escape. Their formation was impeccable. Iron crawlers in the front, tarantulas behind it, and a mud skull throwing stones. They were like an army. She created Earth Fortress, and it sort of came up her body, and then she cut off the spell just as it reached her neck. She was using it to stop the iron crawlers. Then, she casted Water Cascade, shooting bullets to stop their movements. Then Icicle Field, to freeze the previous water and stop the front line. Then, Blizzard, to skewer the beast in the back. This is sort of a tactic that she's used before in Labyrinth Diving in Chiron. Again, for those who don't remember, she used to go down there solo diving. Like, she needed a way of sort of setting up a formation of spells that would counter anything. Defense, splash, freeze, barrage. This is a tactic that she used that guaranteed victory. But more monsters came pouring through the magic circles. The place was once again brimming with beasts in a blink of an eye. She was overcome with despair. I suppose it really is hopeless. Without moving the corpses, she wasn't going to make it out. But there was too many to handle. The mud skull was shattering her fortress. Iron crawler was bearing down on her. She unleashed a flame slice. killing the Iron Crawler. Again, fire was effective, but it could also cause you your own death. Still, she had no choice. She raised another Earth fortress while her mana was dwindling. She began to panic. What was she to do? Think. She racked her brain as she was unleashing magic on the enemy, but nothing came to mind. Was she gonna die? Her body was on autopilot while she thought of this. Her mind was fuzzy as she ran dry on mana. She thought, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Her entire life flashed before her. The parents again. I for some reason forgot about the parents when I was reading this. Images in her mind, the disappointed look of her parents' face when they realized that she couldn't converse with her village. They taught her to speak because they pitied her. Again, this is what she thought before she went back there. She thought that she was a burden upon them, that they were doing this to pity her. She learned magic after a traveling magician came to the village and left a deep impression on her. I wonder if they'll ever mention who that person was. Now, it sort of words it in a way that the traveler came by and was a magician, and then they left. And that was what made her kind of want to learn magic. So, might not be an important person, but something to kind of put a pin in, I guess. The reason why I like to put a pin in that kind of stuff is, one, Refugien never brings up things for no reason. But two, the aspect of somebody else came by the village that was really important, seemingly. So that village seems to have some very important people just passing by it. And the aspect they're sort of mentioning the fact that they left a deep impression on her. Equipped with basic tier water magic, she set out from the village, meeting 3 boys to form her first party. After traveling for several years, one of the members died and the party disbanded. Again, that was the younger looking boy, because I remember Blaze ends up dying to the snakes, and then Nekopada is still alive. Nokopada. She then set out for the central continent, met many people, and enrolled at the University of Magic. It was her first time taking formal classes in anything, and it had a lasting impact. This is where you're probably getting that aspect of her sort of getting that desire to do the same thing. Like, it was really cool, and I really liked being taught this stuff, and I sort of want to do that too. She earned good grades, was talented, and accomplished a great deal, and earned the jealousy of those around her. At the dorm, her friend and her would lounge in bed and talk about all manners of things. She would meet her master there several years later. He was the one that taught her saint-level water magic. She learned it so fast, it went straight to her head. He got on to her, which her off, so she graduated and left without a word to him. Poor I'm starting to feel bad for Genius now. I would like to see a Roxy re-meet with Genius. That would be kind of a cute little chapter. Again, it kind of sucks not really knowing it. Like, again, I'm kind of assuming it's Genius not having any sort of conversation there, because you would assume that Genius would be like, well, I'm technically her master. I would have figured that if Rudius knew that, he would probably really like Genius. Again, it's that one person teaches the other person. That's the important thing of it. They mentioned that before, this idea of sort of having respect for the one that taught you. I think it was in Ghislaine in regards to Roxy, having that respect because technically Roxy taught Rudius and Rudius taught her. At that point, she set out to the capital of the Osprey Kingdom. Certain someone as exceptional as her could find work. She was wrong though, failing to find anything there or the countryside. But then she found a job as a home tutor. That's how she met Paul and family. Paul's sexual encounters titillated her. Rudy's talent shocked her. She was jealous, but grew a sense of respect for Rudius because he didn't let it get to his head. Unlike her, and this is one of those kind of like interesting things to think about, and it makes me want to go back and reread the first volume, because it's one of those aspects of, I wonder if Refugien left any indication of that. And the only reason it's kind of jumping in my head right now is because recently on the Discord we were watching the first couple episodes, and it made me sort of wonder if there was an indication there that she's like, Rudy, despite him being so good, he's not full of himself. Unlike me, when I learned Saint Tier magic, I let it get to my head. I puffed up, and I thought I was way too good for my master, and got out of there without a word. Rudy's different. And again, I would imagine that Refugien was thinking about this way back then, because what was in Rudius's mind back there? Like, for the first, I mean, it's always been in Rudius's mind. It's always in his mind, don't get full of yourself. You're not the main character. Because my previous life, I know not to let the stuff get to me. Not to let it get to my head, to make me feel puffed up. It's because of his previous life that he has this sort of limiter that keeps him from getting too full of himself. Before parting, Roxy taught him Saint Tier water magic. Since then, she started delving into the labyrinths near the Sharon Kingdom. Sometime later, the kingdom hired her to teach magic to Prince Pax, which, here it is, reminded her, again, how amazing Rudius was. as well as how little talent she had to teach. Again, here's that twofold. I was mentioning this earlier, this idea of you're comparing yourself to a genius like Rudius, who is technically an isekai, and an idiot, Pax. You can't gauge your ability to teach these two children because they're just these anomalies. You have to find a normal person to sort of gauge yourself. But right here, it's sort of taking a straight approach. Because he's so dumb, I realize how smart Rudius is. At the same time, because I can't make him not dumb, and because he was already a genius, I must suck at this. Again, self-deprecating Roxy. That's my new title for her, self-deprecating Roxy. But this is sort of a thing a lot of people do. Anybody that meets Rudius at some point does this. She made a book for Rudy, which I still... It still breaks my heart about that book. When I read the novels, I realized how good that book was, and it broke my heart. I mean, it was cool in the anime, but it wasn't as detailed as the book in the novel. And I'm sure it's disintegrated because I don't think anybody had it in their hands. Again, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out later on that one of the maids that was in the castle was carrying it somewhere else, and then the teleportation happened. So it's, if they died, whatever, it ended up somewhere. Not if they died, whatever, because it would be a cute animal girl, but still, you get what I'm saying. But yeah, she made the book for Rudy before becoming disgusted by her job and left Sharon Kingdom. She at that point learned about the displacement incident, met Elise and Telhand, and set out for the Demon Continent. When she was reunited with her parents, she found out that they really loved her. They really did love her. And again, I will still say this, I believe the anime did that whole scene so much better. The reuniting with her family was so good in the anime. It was such a good adaptation. I was really let down by the novel version of it. After that, she met Kishirika. And then, all the memories ran in an instant. An iron crawler was bearing down on her, and her fire magic had melted the frost nova. She thought, I can't do this. I don't want to die. I don't want to. No. She screamed in her head. Screaming, she swung her staff around. Her staff was then pulled away by a web, and she inched backwards to the wall behind her. There was nothing left for her to do. Closing her eyes, her last thought was being unable to see her mother and father again. I like that. I like that it was the parents. Because easily it could be, I thought about Rudy. Because everybody thinks about Rudy. Doesn't think about anybody else but her mom and dad. That's what her last thing was that she wanted to see. Because again, what did she say as she was leaving? They're like, we're going to come to see us again? And she was saying like, I don't know, maybe in like 40 years, something like that. She just kind of just shrugged off while she was leaving. Now, granted, yes, then that was the point that she realized that they loved her and they had this emotional reunion and everything. But she had a purpose at that point to go find somebody, and then she left again. It wasn't a desire to get away from them at that point. She wanted to get back to see them eventually. She no longer just wanted to stay away from there. Again, because she felt like they were pitying her. She wants to see them again. I love my Roxy. I love my Roxy. After a bit, nothing came. Maybe she died instantly. Peeling her eyes open, she's seen an unimaginable vista before her. A world of ice. Everything frozen in pure white statues. Everything was frozen solid. And it kind of mentions later on this idea that it's not just they're encased in ice, like typically with magic, like how she does it, splash them with water, frost nova. Frozen completely through. 100% of the mass is frozen. The gulf in power between this spell and hers was vast. Which right there is pretty much already indicating it's Rudius. Her own merely froze the surface of things. This had to likely have killed everything in the area. Again, not imprisoning like she does, killing. It's a frozen to death rather than frozen to stop. She reached for her staff but dropped it as a sensation of ice shot up her fingers. Oh, thank God. A young man walked towards her, weaving around the ice statues. The moment she's seen him, her heart started pounding. Blood rushed to her face. This man was her ideal type. Again, way back here, this was her dream scenario. I'd be in some labyrinth, some prince and charming would show up. He'd be so handsome and everything, and he's gonna save me and we're gonna spend time in the labyrinth together and we'll escape together. And right here, she's marking him as her ideal type, flushing her face. Like, she's blushed immediately the moment he sees him. Sorry, Roxy, I don't think it's ever gonna happen. Girl, just move on. You don't need him. This is where it starts to kind of hurt my feelings right now. I'm like, and it's like in the next chapter too, Roxy's like just dead set on him. He was tall, with soft hair and gentle features. He was draped in a gray robe and held a staff, but was well built for a magician. His face looked relieved as he approached, gazing down at her. He rushed up and wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck, seemingly overcome with emotions as he inhaled deeply. It's like a mixture of like, he's just so freaking happy, but at the same time is like, yeah, he wants to get a whiff. He's smelling. Jokes aside, I think it's a really an emotional scene. Again, this girl means everything to him. She then realized something. She hadn't bathed in a month. He don't care. She pushed him back, but realized that she did something terrible. This guy just saved my life, and now I'm being rude. But she didn't want him to think that she was stinky. She was stinky. It's not like you pushing away is gonna make you not stinky. But why was she worrying about that? She couldn't think straight. Because she's flustered, and she's like, this is my ideal man. I don't want to be stinky in front of him. My apologies. I just kind of stink. I stink? I'm sorry. He sniffed his sleeve. No, not you. My body. I've been here for a month. Oh, that's what you meant. It doesn't really bother me. Well, it bothers me. She thought, forget it. It doesn't matter right now. Thank you so much for saving me. No, not at all. It was only natural. It didn't seem natural to face that kind of horde for her. It's a pleasure to meet your acquaintance. My name's Roxy McGurdia. If you don't mind, may I have your name as well? Make my acquaintance? Huh? Have we met before? If so, I must apologize. I'm afraid I don't remember. She did get a sense that she had seen him somewhere before. He sort of resembled Paul. Don't remember? He staggered backwards, slapped his hand over his mouth, and then threw up. Soon after that, she discovered it was Rudy, all grown up. Soon after, Paul and the others caught up and took her into their care. With that, she narrowly escaped death. And yes, Roxy being saved was just massive, massive, massive relief for me. Seeing her back at the inn in chapter 5, I'm like, yes, Roxy's safe. Don't know if anything's coming up. I don't need to know, chat. But yes, Rudius, good boy, saved the girl. And when you find out what Rudius did in order to save her, it's like, good boy. He did not let anything get in his way. He knew something was going on, which I'm going to get into my thoughts on that in a minute. But yes, chapter 5, The Indomitable Magician. Roxy was just as Rudius remembered, looking and behaving the same, though weakened, dirty, and disheveled by being trapped in there. Despite that, she hadn't lost her spirit at all. If only you knew, Rudius. If only you knew where her mind was going. Seeing her condition, Geese called for an immediate withdrawal. Heading to the entrance, Talhan carried Roxy. Of course, Rudius suggested that he carried Her Holiness. Her Holiness. But they needed his spells. He did debate if it was acceptable to let such a brute carry Roxy. But no one else protested, Roxy included. It's like, no, she's this holy relic. You must carry her. I must carry her. Let me carry her. Even to this day, Rudius still sees her as literally a goddess. It's not even a joke. Roxy apologized to Talhan for stinking, but he said that he wouldn't be able to call himself an adventurer if he was bothered by it. And this surprised her because it caused Rudy to vomit. At this point, Rudius was thinking about the fact that, yeah, technically, they did travel together for a long time. The way they spoke to each other, he knew they trusted each other deeply. It made Rudius jealous. Just like Sylphie. Remember when Sylphie was talking to Luke and stuff? He's all jealous about that. It's like all of his girls. He's like, oh man, everybody's too chummy with each other. Teacher, you know it wasn't because I thought that you were stinky that I threw up. Roxy glanced back at him before quickly averting her eyes. Then why'd you throw up? I was caught between happiness at finally being able to see you again and despair that you didn't remember me. And my stomach just knotted up. She then mumbled, It's not like I forgot you. I just couldn't make a connection between the adorable Rudy from a long time ago and the current you. The adorable Rudy.
It was a short conversation, but hearing her voice after a long time filled him with such joy he could fly right up to heaven. I have the same feeling. Every time I hear this Seiyu, I have the same feeling. I love her Seiyu so much. My gosh, her voice just melts me. Back at the inn, everyone was celebrating Roxy's return. Likely because it was their first good news since they first started going into the labyrinth. Granted, in Rudius' mind, he figured they were just filling the hole that they dug. But Rudius wasn't going to say that. Yeah, that's not a really good thing to say. Everybody's celebrating. You're like, yeah, you guys are just fixing your mistakes. I can kind of sort of see him blurting that out because, again, technically, their mistake nearly cost him her holiness. Roxy was immediately taken away to the bath by Lilia. Rudius hovered outside, hoping that he could help, but Vieira then shooed him away. He didn't have any bad motives, honestly, despite his previous offense. Yes, the fact that he technically caught a peek of her back in Buena Village. He thought about defending his case, but it was fine. He knew that if he seen her clothes sitting there, he would probably grab a little white cloth and stick it in his pocket. He's got to get a new one. Again, because the other one got washed. He's got to get a new one. And that one's going to be well worn. Oh, this is getting so inappropriate. He couldn't give his perverted side an opportunity. Right now, his feelings were innocent. They would be resting for a few days to give Roxy time to recover. She had no major injuries and swore after food and sleep that she'd be back to normal. Still, Rudius felt he screwed up and behaved shamefully in front of her. He hoped that she wasn't disillusioned with him. Barfing was disrespectful, but he was in shock that she forgot about him. Despite constantly thinking of her while they were apart, he wondered if Sylphie felt the same way. He would have to apologize to her when he returned. Again, this is kind of the aspect of things changing so much over this period of time. It's a long time. This has been a massive amount of time. Yes, Roxy is the only case, and sort of Sylphie as well, but Sylphie had a different aspect with her. Roxy and Sylphie technically have that aspect that they don't really age the same way that humans do. Rudius grew a lot because he's human. Roxy never changed because she's a Megurdian. Sylphie grew a little bit, but the significant thing was that her hair changed, and yes, that she was dressed up like a boy and was wearing glasses. It's sort of the same aspect there. Sylphie was terrified at the idea of Rudius not remembering her. Rudius was destroyed by the fact that Roxy didn't remember him. By that aspect of like, I was disrespectful in front of her. I puked. I can't act that way around her. Maybe she no longer likes me because I puked in front of her. It was totally disrespectful. Roxy slept an entire day. Rudius wanted to be the first to bid her good morning, so he was kind of hovering again outside of her room, but then again, Lilia shooed him away. It's like he keeps showing up in front of the door and just like, get out of here. He did catch a glimpse of Roxy's face, sleeping peacefully. On the second day, Roxy met them at lunch hour. She marched right over as they were eating, stiff as a robot. Good morning, teacher. Yes, good morning, Rudy. I mean, Mr. Rudius. Currently in the room was Rudius, Ellen Lace, Paul, and Talhand. While they spent time resting as the diving party, the waiting party and Geese ran errands. Rudius was a little surprised at the fact that Geese was doing that as well and not, resting like everybody else. With his hard work, Rudius figured that he should become an administrator or something. Everyone. Roxy gazed meekly at everyone before bowing. I'm sorry to cause you all trouble, but I'm really okay now. They were all happy and welcoming. Paul spoke up. Well, if you want to thank somebody, thank Rudy. If he hadn't started babbling, Father, I can sense God nearby, and run forward, punching through walls, we wouldn't have found you. Rudy is like, he made it sound like I was a nutcase. But Rudy somehow knew exactly where she was, and that she was in trouble. He made a beeline for her voice, without regard of danger or tunnel collapsing. Each wall, he smashed through it. Rudius smash. He didn't know how he knew that she was in trouble. He just did. It was like their bond drawing them together. Maybe there was a slight chance the man god had intervened, but Rudius disregarded that. There was only one god that he believed in. Maybe God guided him there. With that, there was nothing strange about it at all. Kind of wonder about this. It's sort of an interesting sort of thing that he's bringing up here. This idea of sort of a sensation that he has to go this direction. Again, these labyrinths are huge, and he just kind of sensed that she was there and beelined for it. Now, there is an aspect to be said that if you want to be a little bit, yes, a little uncomfortable here, there's an aspect that he has smelt her scent for a long,
long time. And that could be so embedded in him that if she had gone past that area at some point, he could technically be like a dog, smelling the scent and where it's going to. There could be an actual scientific explanation for it, but there could also be an aspect of, what if Rudius is somehow connected to her in some deeper way, some spiritual way that draws him to her? Or, crazy theory here, this idea of somehow creating a sense of a god and being able to, because he's been worshiping her so long, there is sort of a spiritual aspect of her that draws him in. That's a crazy theory, though. Roxy bowed to Rudius. Mr. Rudius, what I mean to say is, thank you. She felt cold and distant. No, it was something he had learned in school. The way that she called his name, Mr., as if he was a stranger. Don't worry about it. I only did what anyone would do. More importantly, please just call me Rudy. She looked down and mumbled, but doesn't it sound like I'm being overly familiar with you if I call you that? What? But we are close. If I'm going to have my own teacher call me Mr. Rudius, then I may as well make my father do the same. Hey now, why the hell would I do that? I'd like you to call me Rudy, just as affectionately as you once did. No matter how many years pass, I will always revere you, Roxy McGurdia, as my teacher. She blinked, then blushed red. Rudy thought maybe she has a fever? Come on, Rudy. Come on. Are we going back to the... I thought we left the clueless protagonist thing behind. She slapped her cheeks before correcting herself. Yes, you're right, Rudy. There. That's perfect. All that aside, you really have gotten big. I am a human, after all. You didn't seem to have changed at all, though. Yes, I'm still small as ever. I don't think you're small as you think you are. Oh, really? He knows how to get to her heart. If you ever want to swoon over Roxy, just say, no, you're not as small. You're getting bigger. This was bringing back memories to Rudius. Memories precious to him. Again, Roxy did so much for him. So important to his life. Roxy then commended him on his spell that he used, assuming it was an Emperor tier. But Rudius thought, no, it's just a simple Frost Nova. Not the absolute zero that she assumed it was. He was simply mimicking her magic, the ones that Talhan said that Roxy was using. However, Rudius was hesitant to correct her. Being a water magic specialist, it would be a shame if she discovered that she misinterpreted the spell. He sort of got this mindset that this is my master, and if I correct her when she's technically a specialist and she's my master, it's sort of like rubbing in her face that she's wrong. He doesn't want to make her feel belittled. He figured that he could probably agree with her, but then tell her in private that it was something different. But then she might react negatively to that. He is overthinking everything he says to her because, again, he reveres her. He thinks that she is super special, which again is kind of that continuation of my mindset earlier of I'm wondering at what point he's going to take her off that pedestal. But even still, like later on, he'll kind of get in the aspect that he does acknowledge that he is better than her in so many ways. But he still thinks that that's not the sum of a person, which I think is a really great way to think about other people. To not assume that just because these things aren't as good in your hands doesn't make you any less of a person in my eyes. But on the reverse, it is that aspect of Roxy seemingly feeling inadequate. Talhan then spoke up while he was thinking about what to say.
Nah, that was just a Frost Nova. It just had more power behind it than the one you use.
Oh, so that's it. My apologies. Honestly, Roxy, you haven't changed at all. Though I do agree with you. It wouldn't strike me as strange in the least for Rudius to use Emperor tier magic. After all, he's considered to be the most powerful magician in the University of Magic. Annalise was backing up Roxy, but Rudius thought that last part wasn't necessary. It is nice. Again, this kind of shows that aspect that reminder to Rudius and everybody else, the aspect that yes, Talhan, Roxy, and Annalise traveled together for a long time. They know their chemistry. Annalise would know that Roxy would feel inadequate to Rudius. She's saying this because she's trying to help Roxy not think that she's a failure. Oh, that makes sense. I understand what you're going from. I understand. I would think the same thing. My current abilities are all thanks to my teacher's guidance. Rudy, I keep hearing that you keep claiming that, but you don't honestly think that's true. Of course I do. Roxy's teachings was Rudius's foundation. Go outside. Talk to people. Get along with others. No prejudice. Give it your best. Those were the things that Roxy taught him. Again, that's that misconception that there's a break in understanding between the two of them. Roxy thinks that she's inadequate because she couldn't teach him more. He learned everything so fast, she barely did anything for him. But there was so much more knowledge that she technically gave him. It wasn't just about magic. She was telling him about the world. And eventually, she showed him the world. She showed him he can go into the world. Ruius' perspective, those are the things that she taught him. It wasn't magic. She taught him about going out, meeting people, not being prejudiced. These things took deep roots in him. For example, it was how he established his relationship with Rajerd. Though, technically, she did tell him if you see a gem, run away. But it was all the other stuff that technically offset it. You've improved on your own completely without my teaching. Giving a self-deprecating smile, Roxy continued. You've grown up into an incredible man, the complete opposite of a klutz like me, who got herself trapped in a labyrinth. Roxy. She's so self-deprecating. She slumped onto the table with a thud. Ruius could see the top of her scalp where her hair swirled out from. It was kind of cute. Paul then spoke up. The master is incredible, and so is a student. What could be better? Ruius commended Paul in his mind. He knew that he wasn't special, but Roxy was amazing. So what if she lost to her pupil in a few narrow categories? This wasn't an indicator of her value as a person. Again, I love this. I love somebody, and again, it's partly to do with the fact that it's about Roxy, but I think he has this mindset for a lot of other people. Not making people the sum of what they think is so important. No, there's so much more about you that's important. It's sort of an experience that I'm having currently with a loved one. They've sort of lost what they've done their entire life because of a change in their physicality. They're not able to do the work they used to do. And so it's like, they felt like their whole self-worth is lost. Like, this is what I've spent my whole life perfecting, and I can't even do that anymore. And then you're trying to explain to them there's so much more to their life that they can get into. So much more is more important than that. Paul continued, if you hadn't been with us, we wouldn't be here. Have a little confidence. His words rallied her spirits before Geese and the rest returned for their meeting. Geese at this point decided on waiting 3 days before diving again. Paul thought it was hasty, which Ruius in his mind agreed. The teleportation labyrinth was especially taxing, with how you had to watch your step at all times. I could see that being like extremely like anxiety filled. Like, you're not just attacking things, you're not just looking where to go, you're not keeping your balance, you're not choosing your spells, you're also having to watch every step. But Geese reminded them of something important. A curse. Though he had no clue why, but if you nearly die in a labyrinth and don't return quickly, you'll be filled with fear and be unable to do anything. It's sort of this idea of like this, if you don't just jump back in and you wait a little bit period of time and then you go back to there later on, you'll be so terrified. They think it's sort of this, it's sort of like a, not necessarily like an actual curse. It could be an actual curse, who knows? It might be an aspect of you going in a labyrinth and you're sort of, the mana itself is getting in your body. And if you get close to death, maybe it infuses with you in some way and creates some sort of a curse. But the mindset is more this idea of some sort of post-traumatic stress that you end up having. Jumping back in doesn't allow that to sort of build up in your mind to be an issue later on. So they want to get Roxy back as soon as possible. Additionally, Geese felt that Rudius needed to keep at it repeatedly so he can gain some experience. After that, each of them jumped in with comments. Roxy offered pointers about doubling on being healing and offensive magic. Paul was against the idea of Rudius using that method to punch through walls again. They were all taking this seriously. Weakened, they were still S rank. Their new focus was mapping the 3rd floor, then find the 4th floor circle. Typically, groups would go down there, look for the teleport to the next floor, and they would go back to the entrance, rest, and then make a beeline there. If you weren't quick, there was a possibility of the number of traps increasing. Speed was crucial. I'm wondering if the traps aspect is the labyrinth itself detecting that people go through it and so it creates more traps or shifts them, or if it's the monsters themselves formatting around that. Like with Roxy, she waited in there so long they were technically building bodies on top of the teleporter so that she couldn't get through. Paul and Geese discussed how the book mentioned the 4th floor changing to some sort of runes. There was instances where long existing labyrinths combined to a single one, containing 2 centers or 2 hearts with magically imbued crystals. This is sort of an interesting idea if you have these 2 labyrinths going down on the ground, and then at some point they kind of shift and then just kind of merge into each other. Having a similar layout, changing partway through. So this one, like that ruin layout, and then you had the labyrinth, that currently the teleport labyrinth, where it's like the little tunnels that the ants were going through, and then maybe at some point it just touched that other labyrinth and kind of merged to it. According to the book, the teleportation labyrinth had only 1 crystal. I didn't really realize that. I think I mentioned that in last Mushoku Monday. I'm like, they didn't necessarily say anything about finding the boss or anything like that. But here, no, he's confirming it. Apparently, this guy found the magic crystal. But again, just because you find the magic crystal doesn't mean you go and get it. Again, a lot of people just want the loot in there, not necessarily the magic crystal. They want these powerful, magically infused items. It may have been originally an ordinary labyrinth that merged to some old ruins to take its current form. Speaking of ruins, there's a reason for this. There's got to be a reason why he brings this up. Speaking of ruins, there was also ones containing the teleportation circles they used to get there. Yes, it's pointing out the idea that, yeah, the place that he used to teleport to get there was a ruin. But it's a very simple ruin. They just went up in there, went to like 2 rooms, and went downstairs, and there was that. And it was kind of similar in the Beggaret continent. It's like the same layout. But this is one of those moments where it's like, he's got to be bringing this up for a reason. Like, Refugion's having him bring this up for a reason. The only thing that kind of comes to my mind is the idea that, what if the labyrinth itself, the teleportation labyrinth, what if at some point it was just a labyrinth? There was no teleports in it. Like he says, it was originally just an ordinary labyrinth. Then at some point, over here was a ruins that had a teleporter on it, just like the ones they got here on. And it merged into that ruins. And then it basically took the element of teleportation circles and went into it. Or maybe the monsters that were within this ruins then started going into the normal labyrinth as they merged and started putting down teleportation circles. Like, it's this idea that he's sort of hinting here. It was ordinary. Oh yeah, by the way, there's these teleporters that we use, these ruins that I use to get here. And sometimes they merge. Put those 3 things together, and you basically have how this teleportation labyrinth was created. So maybe the idea that any teleportation labyrinth in the world might be a case of an ordinary labyrinth that at some point infused itself with a teleportation ruins. Roxy then questioned about the book. After Geese explained about it, she planned on reading it the next day. With that in mind, Ruius grew excited that he'd be staying nearby to answer any question that she has. He's like super into this, like, yes, I could be there for her. It is technically that excitement, you know, somebody that's taught you so much stuff and then you have that moment to teach them. I've had that experience a lot where me growing up, I got into computers eventually, and so a lot of people that taught me a lot of things growing up, I was able to tell them about computers and stuff. It's exciting. Geese then had Talhan reform the party layout, the smell of alcohol pouring from him at the time. Roxy would take the rear, Ruius would support her. Talhan felt that Ruius was calm for his age, and that he figured that he could use eye of foresight and his wits to stop something before it goes wrong, which Ruius wanted to protest at this. Talhan made it sound as if Roxy lacked composure, but Ruius figured this gave him an excuse to keep his eye on Roxy. Maybe Talhan's doing you a favor. Keep that in mind. He might be saying this just so you have an excuse. Yeah, the reason why it gave him an excuse to look at Roxy is because in order for his eye of foresight to work, he had to be looking at things. So he's gonna have to keep an eye on Roxy. Additionally, Elise and Paul would swap places. Talhan would defend the rear, which is, again, Ruius and Roxy. The formation was Geese Scout, Paul and Elise Vanguard, middle, Talhan, and rear, Roxy and Ruius.
Any opinions on this?
Should I take this to mean that my role basically won't change?
Yeah, you can talk to Roxy about your teamwork.
Ruius then glanced to Roxy, who returned his gaze. She looked a bit nervous, and then she gulped. All right then, I look forward to working with you, teacher. Yes, I as well. I'll do my best not to hold you back. Ruius honestly felt like he was holding her back. Again, the two of them just don't see eye to eye at all. He really wished that she'd be more confident. You ruined her, Ruius. You literally broke her. Sure, he had more mana and more spell usage, but stats and strength wasn't the sum of one's worth. True power was gained by experience, which I technically agree. And Roxy was ahead of him in that regard. She spent a whole month fighting in that labyrinth, only to recover in a few days, ready to go right back as if nothing happened. Yes, that technically is something you could probably tell her vocally, Ruius. Like, to have more confidence in yourself. You literally lived down there for a month, and you're like, all right, let's go back. But again, it goes to that credit of the idea of, it doesn't matter if you have an arsenal of 50 spells, and that you're level 99. It doesn't matter if you don't even know how to use the spells. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't know the command system. Where somebody that just has been, that knows the system ins and out, has that experience to use that, that's what's actually more useful. And yes, technically the idea that she didn't panic at all. She was facing hordes and was just dropping down her rotation. All right, earth field, splash the water, freeze them, throw some blizzard. Like, she had her rotation down. She's been doing this for a long time. As opposed to Rudius for a lot of cases where he just kind of panics and somebody has to snap him out of it. Like the whole situation with the bandits. Had to snap him out of it constantly. Do something. Rudius felt that if that happened to him, experiencing something so horrific, he'd probably swear to never enter that labyrinth again. A wise Japanese proverb stated, "A wise man stays away from danger." Very wise man. Like that. It's a very unique statement. Call him a chicken all you wanted. He knew he was a coward. It's a bold thing to claim for yourself. I think that's a little bit harsh on yourself, but at the same time, it's good to be able to admit that. Geese then gave orders to the waiting party, as well as consulted Sierra about Roxy's condition. He also wanted Sierra to prepare medical supplies necessary for Zenith's rescue. I found this interesting, because my mind immediately went, wait, you didn't have that already? Like, you have to get the supplies now? Now, it could be they used some of those supplies on Roxy, but still, it might be an indication that Geese right now feels massive confidence. We went down there the first time, found Roxy, came back up. The book worked. We know now this book is literally working, that it's matching. He's full of confidence. We're going to get Zenith now. We have everything we need. He also entrusted Lilia to oversee all the tasks that he gave out. It seemed that Geese was a leader of the Labyrinth party. Lilia was for the waiting party, and Paul was for the overall group. Paul's position was to oversee the final decision-making and keep track of everyone when he's not passed out, slumped out on a table, apparently. Paul had everyone prepare for 3 days from now, before dismissing them. Cut to the next day, Rudius hovered around the first floor. Yes, Roxy was reading the book, and so he was pacing around, waiting for her to consult him if she had anything that she didn't understand. Him specifically. No one else. He doesn't want anyone else answering the questions about the book. Him. Rudy? Yes? What is it, teacher? You shuffling around like that, it's distracting. She forced a smile. My apologies. He hung his head, deciding to leave. He was distracting her. That made sense. He was getting in the way of her reading. He didn't want to cause her any trouble, but rather be of assistance. Maybe he should go somewhere then. Somewhere deserted. Maybe a deserted tavern. Yeah, probably good to drink alone. I like this like downward spiral of like, I am a nuisance. I must leave now. I must go away. Where can I go that I won't be around her? Rudy, if you have enough time to shuffle about, there are some things I would like to ask you about this book. Okay. He immediately rushed to her side like he broke the sound barrier. If he was a dog, his tail would be whipping around like a propeller. Where is it? Please feel free to ask me anything. Roxy's sure was tiny, though it was partly to do with his growth. He could easily wrap his arms around her if she sat on his lap. But that would piss her off. Yeah, please sit right here. Oh, you're so tiny. She glanced over to him from the side. What's wrong? She shifted back quickly to the book. No, it's nothing. It's this part right here. He thought their change in height may have discouraged her. She did seem to be self-conscious of her height. Such was his thought as they spent the day together reading. Rudius was content. And that is chapter 5. Managed to get through 3 chapters. I'm just super happy Roxy's safe. Rejoice. The goddess. She is safe. Really good. Like I said, the main key thing here, 3 was fantastic. Really kind of seeing Paul and his mindset in the dungeon itself. Rudius traveling down there with him, giving everything to everybody to guide him, giving them pretty much waiting to be told things rather than jumping out there and using his own previous knowledge to push his way in. But I think with the aspect of 4, it's heavily on just this dire situation that Roxy was in, showing how I think Roxy ends up being pretty much the point of view of this is when you don't have the book. This is literally what Paul and everybody else was going through. Now, granted, differently with Paul and all of them because they were technically going down there with his guidance. Yes, Roxy was with them, of course, but they were being very careful. Roxy was being careful too, but she made a slip up. But then following that is this aspect of how bad it is if you mess up. This is what will happen if you mess up, Rudius. This is what will happen to you in a teleportation labyrinth. This is what everybody has happened to them, and they die. Roxy, as she pointed, I never hear about people surviving this. She survived it, but that's how dire it is. And in a 5 this is where I'm starting to get this question mark, and I really do hope eventually it does come to fruition. Like I mentioned earlier, when will we possibly get a point in which Rudius is disillusioned about Roxy? Finally sees that she is a normal person. Yes, technically a Magurdian, but a normal person. When will he no longer put her on that pedestal? Or will he never take her off that pedestal? Will he always, for the rest of his life, always see Roxy as a goddess? And, like I joked about earlier, which, shoot, why not be a theory that I hold on to for a while now? I'm always for crazy theories that I love to put over here and go, I wonder if this will ever happen. What if he is manifesting her to become a goddess? Right? Not that she's going to be glowing and becoming immortal and fly up into the sky and rain down rays of light, but sort of manifest it in some way. Again, Rudius is an anomaly. But I think the core thing here, jokes aside, and that theory thrown way over there is an element here of, obviously, Roxy does not see Rudius the same anymore. And again, partly is an aspect of that dream moment, that meeting that she dreams about way back here. She hopes one day some boy will come in, the Prince Charming will save her from a labyrinth, and they'll escape the labyrinth together and fall in love. She finally had that moment. So obviously her turning her gaze and blushing and all this kind of stuff is Roxy realizing she likes Rudius. Which breaks my heart, obviously, now that we know that Rudius has chosen Sylphie. This ain't happening, but again, that goes back to my point that I made before. I don't really necessarily want Roxy to be Rudius's choice. I don't find them fit for each other. But it is sort of breaking my heart now because I'm seeing that she wants him. So it's even though I would hope that she kept that separation, she's not. She is becoming flustered by him. And because he's apparently has decided to take on the Clueless protagonist persona again, he's suddenly going, oh, well, she must be looking away because I'm taller than her or something. Rudy? Dude? Really? Oh, eyes here. Really? He's being dumb. But no, I really like this reunion. It's been so long since Rudius and Roxy have been together. It's technically, what was he, when he's 6 or something like that? Way back in Buena Village. When he's a young little pup. Finally reunited with him after so long of him, again, adoring and always thinking about her and praising and worshiping her. Finally reunited together. And I'm excited right now because we've established Roxy's safe. Next step, find Zenith. So I'm excited to go find Zenith. What is that journey going to be? But what I'm more excited about is seeing the interactions between Roxy and Rudius, because I want to see if a point will come up that Rudius will either stop worshiping her or what kind of effect he's going to have on her. Because again, he makes her feel lacking. He makes her feel inferior. Again, it's almost a toxic aspect. Rudius is almost toxic to Roxy because everything that she can do, he can do better. And I almost think that based on what he said earlier, that he'll choose to use less powerful magic because he doesn't want to show her up. That might actually create a very interesting dynamic. But no, I'm happy to see them back together. And that freaking picture, that picture at the end of chapter 5. Oh my goddess, she's so gorgeous. I would be right there with Rudy. Like, I'd be right next there. Question, I'll answer it. She's so gorgeous. I miss Roxy. I'm happy to have her around. I hope that she stays safe because we're going back in the labyrinth, but we'll see. But that's chapter 5. I hope you guys enjoyed this Mushoku Mondays. That's all we're going to get through today. Thank you guys once again for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed it as per usual. Greatly appreciate your guys' kind words. Everybody in the chat, hey chat, welcome to the chat. Hit that like button before you leave. Don't leave without hitting it. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button before you leave. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top lists, all that good stuff. And again, Mushoku Mondays, every single Monday, I do a premiere. Additionally, if you do like this content and you want to support this content more, I do have a Patreon link, a tips link, super thanks, membership buttons down below. I greatly appreciate everybody that does that. Your guys' support makes this continue on. Just got some new Patreon members here recently and new memberships. I thank you, every single one of you guys. It means so much to me. But yes, with all that said, until the next Mushoku Mondays, you'll have a great week. She was here. He was certain of it. He can smell the aroma of the goddess Roxy. I was so happy about this. It was more the fact that I was happy to read this. Why this such? What even caused that?
We'll be on the 3rd floor soon. This, right here. This, right here. This is where Roxy got separated from us. If we're lucky, we should be able to she stood. If we're lucky, she should. If we're lucky, she should be. If we're lucky, she should. If we're lucky, she should be around that area. If the book is if the books is anything to go off, if we're lucky, she should be around this area still. If the book's anything to go by.
All right. According to the book, traps sent you into different areas on the same floor. Even though they were called random warp, it wouldn't suddenly send you to the final boss. It wouldn't suddenly send you to the front. It wouldn't suddenly send you to the boss on the final floor. Roxy had to have been warped on the third. Roxy was warped on the 3rd floor. They had no idea if the circle she stepped on was. They had no idea if the circle that she stepped on was a random or a fixed destination. Geese pondered. Reese had pondered how he could. Reese did ponder how his. Reese. He wondered if he could utilize his spells to find her, but nothing came to mind. Boss, just use your intuition on this. Where do you think Roxy would be? My intuition, huh? We can't afford to cover this entire labyrinth and fine-tune comb. We can't afford to cover this entire labyrinth with a fine-tooth comb. So we're gonna have to look. After all, there was no one in the group that could analytic. After all, there was no one in the group with analytical ability. After all, there wasn't anyone. Also, I told you not to call me newbie. 10 years after they first entered, they arrived on the 3rd floor. Her body was on autopilot. I stink? I'm sorry. At that point, the man sniffed his. I stink? I'm sorry. He sniffed his shoulder. He sniffed his. I stink? I'm sorry. He sniffed his. He sniffed his sleeve. He sniffed his sleeve. I stink? I'm sorry. He then sniffed his sneeze. I can't. It's like is that a tongue twister? Sniffed his sneeze. I hate this sometimes. I stink? I'm sorry. I stink?